Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to be breaking down the Friday, January 31st slate of college basketball. We're going to be primarily DFS oriented on DraftKings as well as FanDuel, but if you do play player props or if you are looking to bet on these games, hopefully we're going to give you guys a little bit of tidbits and nuggets that can help you out as well. On DraftKings, we have a 3-game slate, and personally, I am a big fan of this slate. I think DraftKings did a really good job with game selection. These are 3 really intriguing, really fun games, and I think they did a pretty good job with pricing. Like, there's some guys that you could argue are a little bit of a misprice, but it's not egregious to the point where we're going to see anybody that's like going to be 95% owned. And really, there's going to be a ton of points scored in these games. So I think that there's a ton of options, a ton of different matchups that you can exploit here on this slate. And I'm really looking forward to breaking it down. We are going to go over all 3 of these games, tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups for each slate, or for each game, as well as, kind of talk about the player prop and betting angle as well. Now, if you have not already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of college basketball season, all the way up until the national championship game in April. I cannot guarantee that we're going to have an episode every day. I'm still in the middle of coaching my high school basketball season. We're currently tied for first place in the conference, and we've got 4 more weeks of the season left. So on nights we have games, it's a little bit rough trying to record. We do have a game tomorrow night, Friday night, so I'm probably not going to have an episode for the Saturday slate, but there are ways where you can get more information from me, of which we're going to go over later. But if you are subscribed to the channel, then you will be able to know when all content drops. All right, that does it for the intro, though. Like I said, we got 3 games that I'm looking forward to breaking down, so let's go ahead and break them down. All right, so game number 1 is a battle in the Big East between Butler and Georgetown. Now, as of right now, Georgetown has everybody listed as healthy that's relevant, but they have given us some surprise injuries this college basketball season. We had some surprise instances of guys playing when they weren't expected to, guys being out when they weren't expected to. So this would probably be the game where I would monitor the injury news as we get closer to lock. I don't think the other 2 games are going to have anything that might impact something, but just from what Georgetown's shown us this season, I'd just be a little bit wary of this one. KenPom has this game as Georgetown winning 71-68. That is a game total of 139 points, which is 3rd of all 3 games on this slate. Now, the reason why that total is so low is because Georgetown really is pretty good defensively, but they're not going to play super fast either. Butler, in their own right, they rank 209th in tempo and 121st in defensive efficiency. Georgetown ranks 171st in tempo and 28th in defensive efficiency. This Georgetown team has really improved their defense a lot over the course of the season, so credit to Ed Cooley for that. Butler, they're not a team that's going to give you a ton of DraftKings points in general. They don't block a ton of shots. They don't get a ton of steals. But the only positive is that they do not foul a lot. They actually rank outside the top 300 in all of those categories: blocks, steals, and fouls. So you can pretty much guarantee that their starters are going to play big minutes, but they're not going to give you a whole lot of ancillary fantasy points from blocks and steals. Georgetown is a team, on the other hand, that they turn the ball over a lot, and they do not draw a lot of fouls. So they tend to play into other teams having good fantasy point outings against them. However, Georgetown is an elite paint defense thanks to rim protector Thomas Sorber. They rank 7th in the nation in 2-point defense. Well, the good news is for Butler is they're probably not going to be testing that Georgetown 2-point defense a lot. This team is going to jack a ton of threes. They play 7 guys in their rotation, and pretty much 6 of them are going to jack threes. All right. Their starters in their last game, they've been tooling with this lineup a little bit. The starters in their last game were Finley Bizjack at the point, with Landon Moore, Pierre Brooks, Jamil Telfort, and then Patrick McCaffrey at the 5. This is a super small lineup that does not feature a center, but like I said, all of these guys are going to jack threes. The only 2 guys that came in off the bench last game were Colby King and Andre Screen. Bowden Kapke is a little bit of an interesting one. He generally plays for this team about 14 to 18 minutes, but he did not play in their last game, and there was no real reasoning why. He is a big fella that they could bring in off the bench if they do feel like they need more size. Now, as I was mentioning, pretty much everybody on this team is going to jack threes that plays, except for Andre Screen. He is a 7-footer. Like I said, he comes off the bench. He's generally a pretty good fantasy points per minute play, but he doesn't always play huge minute totals. He has a super high usage rate when he's out there, but he will also foul a ton, which contributes to him not playing a ton of minutes. But the devil's advocate in me would say, hey, Georgetown doesn't draw a ton of fouls, and Georgetown does play 2 traditional bigs. So the argument could be made that Screen could see a lot of run in this one. And if he does, he could have the potential to absolutely smash the slate at a price tag of $5,400. But I'm not like running to play him. There's certainly not a whole lot of security in that. But just looking at how everything shapes up, it wouldn't shock me if he played 28 to 30 minutes and scored 26 to 28 DraftKings points. points. Now, for the guys that do jack shots, Finley Bidjack is their point guard. I cannot for the life of me figure this guy out. When I play him, he scores like 8 DraftKings points. When I don't play him, he scores like 28. I just don't know how to play this guy. But the good news is that now in recent games, he's playing a ton of minutes. He's taken a ton of shots, and a lot of them are 3-pointers. And he's also not the worst peripheral stat guy in the world. He's got at least 2 rebounds in each of his last 3. He's got 5 total assists in his last 3. So this is a guy that at $4,900 definitely could give you 4x or 5x value that you'd be looking for here in your DFS lineups. Now, the guys that are going to be taking a majority of the shots are Jamil Telfort, Pierre Brooks, and Patrick McCaffrey. Telfort is the usage leader on the season. He is a stat sheet stuffer. His usage rate on the season has been around 25%, and he's going to play nearly every minute of this game, especially if he can stay out of foul trouble. $8,000 is a very reasonable salary for him. You look at his last 3 games, he's had 1 of 40, that's 5x value, 1 of 25, that's 3x value, and then 1 of 33, which is a little over 4x value. So he's pretty comfortably, reasonably priced there at $8,000. Georgetown is a matchup where I don't think it's necessarily a plus matchup for him because it's not like all of his shots are 3-pointers, but he is going to have a chance to put up a decent amount of peripheral stats. He is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. Pierre Brooks is a guy who does shoot most of his shots from 3, but that's kind of all he does is get shots and board. And Georgetown's a pretty solid rebounding team. Georgetown's a team that plays 2 traditional bigs. I don't necessarily think this is the best matchup for Pierre Brooks. I think the guy I like the most from a points per dollar perspective for this Georgetown team is Patrick McCaffrey. He is an Iowa transfer. His dad's the coach, and he's going to take a lot of threes, and he's going to play a lot of minutes. And at $5,300, it doesn't take a whole lot of threes to hit value, right? So I do think that this does shape up pretty well for him, especially if like Butler in their last game, by going with that super small ball lineup with McCaffrey at the 5, like if they stick with that lineup, their floor spacing is going to be really good. It's going to give them a ton of opportunities for catch and shoot threes, and McCaffrey would be a guy who would be shooting it a lot. As we mentioned earlier, Landon Moore is the 5th starter. He does not shoot the ball a ton though, but last 3 games, he's played over 27 minutes in all 3 games. 15, 12, and 15 DraftKings points. So that's not really going to cut it. He's just not a high usage player, not a high volume shooter. He's not for me. These 3-game slates, you're going to have to take some chances, or not going to have to. You might have to take some chances with some of these lower price players and some of these smaller roles on these teams. I don't think Butler is a team to do that with. I think I would be sticking to the top 6 guys in the pricing from Telfort down to Bizjack. All right, now on the Georgetown side, like I said, nothing would shock me when it comes to this team's injury situation, but right now they are projected to be fully healthy. And you look at what has happened to Butler in previous games, and 2 positions have killed Butler, the center position and the point guard position. And ironically enough for Georgetown, they play 2 centers and they play 2 point guards. So it stands to reason that one of those guys is going to go off. Right now at the center position, Thomas Sorber is the better one. Objectively, he is a freshman. He was a big-time recruit. He's really good at basketball, and he has the chance to absolutely break a slate. Against Providence, he put up 25 and 15 with 3 blocks and 2 steals for 58 DraftKings points. Like, that's just the potential that this guy can do. If you are small down low, he is going to take advantage. So if Butler is going to stick with this small ball lineup, I think Sorber could have a massive performance, and I think he is one of the elite pay-up options on this slate at $9,400 on DraftKings. If you're playing player props, I really like the idea of a points, rebounds, assists, because this is a guy who can really stack up all 3 of those things in a hurry, because they will run their offense through him in the post. Their other center is Drew Fielder. He's not as much of a high usage big. He is a pretty good shot blocker. He also generally doesn't play as many minutes as Sorber. The 2 biggest games he had all season were when Sorber was out. So I'm not that enthusiastic about playing him. Like, the last 3 games without Sorber, or with Sorber in the lineup, have been 4, 10, and 13 DraftKings points. So Fielder just doesn't really perform when Sorber's out there as well. The team would just rather play through Sorber, and they would rather play Sorber more minutes. Now, what that does mean is that Fielder would be incredible leverage if Sorber were to happen to get in foul trouble or get injured in this game. So maybe that would be the reasoning for playing him, but it's probably just going to be a pass for me. Now, as for Georgetown's 2-point guards, they have Malik Mack, who is a Harvard transfer, as well as Jaden Epps. Malik Mack is going to play all the minutes. He has not been super efficient lately, but this is a guy who can stuff a stat sheet. The only problem is he's priced up there at $7,400, and I would like to see a little better recent form coming in for a guy who's at that price tag. Jaden Epps is a guy who I have played so much in the last 2 slates because he is back from injury. He's playing his full minute load, but I try to not just come on here and bash college kids. I don't think that's always fair. When we're talking about college basketball, some of these guys are literally going from Econ 305 to hooping at 7 p.m. at night. Like, they got a lot going on. They're just kids. I'm never going to bash them. But I think objectively you can say Jaden Epps is not playing very well right now. In his last 2 games, he has shot the ball 4 from 22 from the field, 0 for 6 from 3, only recorded 2 total assists, only recorded 3 total rebounds, and has put up 4 turnovers in that span. He's been objectively bad in the last 2 games, but the usage rate is still there. He had a 21% usage rate in the St. John's game, more than that against Providence, and he's playing minutes. And he's at $5,500. And this is a guy that we've seen over the course of the season routinely get north of 25 DraftKings points. So I think that Jaden Epps, I'm kind of going to go back to him. Like, he might hurt me again, but I'm willing to be hurt by him again. Now, in between Georgetown's 2 point guards and 2 centers is wing Micah Peavy. He is a stat sheet stuffer. I like Micah Peavy in pace-up games where there's going to be a lot of possessions, where there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to get rebounds, assists, and steals because he's not always the biggest volume scorer. This isn't one of those games. However, the volume shooting has kind of been there recently. In 4 of his last 5 games, he's taken more than 14 shots. I think a lot of that has to do with some of the injuries that they've had to Jaden Epps and to Thomas Sorber. But now Epps and Sorber are both back. So I just can't picture that shot volume continuing for Micah Peavy. So I really have a hard time playing him here on this slate. But because of his ability to stuff a stat sheet, he is a guy that's probably going to make like 1 or 2 of my 20 lineups. Because as I mentioned in the past, I generally do a 20 max and then maybe hand build 2 or 3 more. But he's probably just going to make 1 or 2 of those 20. Now, Georgetown is also not the team I would look to be playing the bench options for. They've got Caleb Williams and Curtis Williams Jr., who will play off the bench. Caleb Williams has not been awful this season. Like, you could go to him when they had some of those injuries and get some decent stat lines from him, but $3,900, I'm just not here for it. And Curtis Williams is just not a high volume offensive player. All right, we're going to take a quick breather, and then we are going to break down the other 2 games. All right, now I do want to mention before we get started with game number 2, there are places where you can get more information from me, particularly if there is a slate where I do not have a full episode. So first off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm trying to do my best. I've been pretty good this week about doing a Twitter thread of just information of a college basketball DFS slate where I don't do a full episode, where you can kind of get some of the key stats, some of the important information from that thread. And you're also going to get all updates from the show there as well. And if you ever have any questions about a lineup or who to start, who to sit, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer. But you can get all that by following me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on the YouTube page as well as on the audio feed. The Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a bunch of really smart, really good people who play DFS for a ton of different sports, and college basketball is one of them. One thing that the Discord is super useful for, even if you don't want to go in there and like talk about different plays, different strategies, whatever, there's a lot of guys in there who are really, really diligent about looking up injury news and just really good about tweeting it out, or not tweeting it out, but just posting it in the Discord, getting the injury news out to the community, and then kind of talking through the plays together. Like, we've had a lot of really good nights in the Discord in the last few weeks because it's just community of people who are looking to share information, looking to help other people win. And it's just a great environment to be in, and I cannot recommend it enough. Also, if you want to know who actually makes all of my DFS lineups for college basketball, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I tweet or post. Why do I always want to make everything a tweet? And especially considering it's not even called Twitter anymore. I don't know what I'm doing there. Anyway, I post my core plays daily for college basketball. And I can't just guarantee that you can just plug those plays in and win thousands of dollars. It's not that easy. But what I can say is that you can get a well-researched, well-thought-out advice from somebody who knows a lot about college basketball, if that's what you're looking for. All right, now let's go ahead and dive into game number 2, which is a battle in the Atlantic 10 Conference between Dayton and St. Louis. This is a rivalry game. I believe they call this game the Battle for the Arch Barons Cup. I don't know what the reference is to there because Dayton is the Flyers, St. Louis is the Billikens. I don't know what the heck an Arch Baron has to do with either of them, but hey, we're here. It's a rivalry game, and this game usually delivers. Most notably, if you remember back in 2020 when Dayton was having their magical run, Jalen Crutcher hitting a 3 in overtime for Dayton to win. Just, this series is big, and it's had its moments, and this is looking like a good game as well. KenPom has this one as 74-73 in favor of St. Louis. That is a game total of 147 points, which is first on the slate. Reason why is not necessarily because either of these two teams play very fast. Dayton ranks 286th in tempo. St. Louis ranks 173rd. But they're good offensive teams, and they're poor defensive teams. Dayton ranks 149th in defensive efficiency. St. Louis is 121st in defensive efficiency. And really, both these teams will score a lot of fantasy points and bleed a lot of fantasy points as well. What I mean by that is Dayton is statistically an efficient shooting team, and they record a ton of assists. More assists just means more fantasy points, y'all. Like if a guy scores a bucket in college basketball and it's just him unassisted, that's 2 DraftKings points among everybody who scored. If there's an assist given out on that play, then there's 3.5 DraftKings points that were given out. So that's very helpful for scoring, honestly. And then St. Louis, they give up a lot of blocked shots. They give up a lot of steals, and they don't block a lot of shots or get a lot of steals in return. So St. Louis is kind of just giving a lot of DraftKings points. So this is an environment that should be very good for fantasy scoring, and I'm certainly looking to play multiple players from this game in all of my DFS lineups here on this Friday slate. Now, let's talk about the Dayton Flyers. This is a team near and dear to my heart. My dad attended the University of Dayton. We actually went up to watch the Dayton Loyola game a few Saturdays ago, which was just electric. This is a team that is currently in flux. They are just not playing their best. If you watch them in Maui, they were really competitive against North Carolina and Iowa State, and they beat UConn, and they beat Marquette at home a few weeks later. They're not playing like that right now. They're currently 500 in A10 play, losing to some of the bottom half of the league teams. So this is a team that they're kind of looking for answers right now. And one thing that they've done recently is, starting with the Loyola game, they moved freshman French center Emile Latang, I think I'm saying that correctly, Emile Latang, into the starting lineup. And in that Loyola game, he played 32 minutes, put up 21 DraftKings points. Well, he started every game thereafter, 23, 28, 19 DraftKings points. So every game since he's been a starter, he's put up over 19 DraftKings points. And even in the St. Bonaventure game, he didn't play a lot. He played 11 minutes to put up 19 DraftKings points. I think he is statistically one of the best value plays on the slate. This is a guy who plays with a 24% usage rate on the season, which is second on the team. And he's always been a great fantasy point per minute player, even dating back to early in the season when he wasn't playing a whole lot of minutes. So this is a guy who can really stuff a stat sheet. He will get you rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals. He's really skilled as a big man. And if he plays 25 plus minutes in this game, you can pretty much pencil him in for about 25 DraftKings points. And so to me, he is one of my favorite value plays on the slate. I'm going to be playing a lot of Emile Latang. Now, as I mentioned, though, this team is currently looking for answers a little bit. And that kind of extends to the big man position that Latang does play. Zed Key was a transfer in from Ohio State that they were really high on at the start of the season, played really well at the start of the season, but now is almost out of the rotation. He injured his back against Loyola and has not played more than 10 minutes in a game since. I have no confidence to play him at all here in this game. And then you have Isaac Jack, who's their third big. He's a Buffalo transfer. He played his season high in minutes against St. Bonaventure last game out. 21 minutes, played a lot in relief of Latang and Zed Key, and put up 15 DraftKings points in those 21 minutes. Now, on these 3-game slates, you can play somebody like this and really use him as big time leverage, because say Latang gets in foul trouble and doesn't get there, well, then Isaac Jack is probably going to put up a ton of DraftKings points if he gets those boosted minutes. So I do think he is a very interesting GPP type of play from a DraftKings perspective. All right, now that's the Dayton bigs. Now let's talk about the Dayton guards. So Malachi Smith is the engine that makes this offense go. He's the little brother of Scoochie Smith, who is one of the best Dayton Flyers of all time. He is their usage leader on the season, north of 25% usage, north of 40% assist rate, ranked 7th in the country in assist rate. So you can very much look at his DraftKings scoring and see the story of how the game went for Dayton. Against St. Bonaventure, Dayton only scored 53 points. Malachi Smith only had 10 DraftKings points. The Loyola game, Dayton scored 83 points. Malachi Smith had 29 DraftKings points. Like, if Dayton is having a successful game offensively, it's quite likely that Malachi Smith is having a successful game offensively as well. He is the guy who runs the show. He puts up a ton of assists. He does have the potential to get you a double-double with points and assists. And to me, if you're looking to stack up multiple pieces of this game, particularly multiple pieces of the Dayton side, it makes a lot of sense to play Malachi Smith, because if Malachi Smith is getting a lot of assists, then that means somebody else on Dayton is scoring. And so for that reason, he is one of my favorite plays on the DraftKings slate as well. Now, in terms of another Dayton player that you might play, Nate Santos is going to be pretty popular. He's a transfer from Pitt. He's pretty good at basketball, but he's very inconsistent from a DraftKings scoring perspective. He does start at the 4 for this team, but he is a little bit of a stretch 4, a little bit of a small ball 4. He's not like a big menace down low. So his rebounding can fluctuate. His scoring can fluctuate. He can be very hot or cold from the 3-point arc. I think he's going to be pretty popular here on this slate at $7,000. He's not my favorite play from the Dayton side, if I got to be honest, though. I would rather go up to Enoch Cheeks. So Enoch Cheeks is a stat sheet stuffer. He averages over 6 boards a game, about 2 assists per game, about 2 steals per game as well, and he'll even chip in with a few blocks. He's an elite on-ball defender, and he has the potential to just go nuclear because of his abilities to fill up a stat sheet. Against Loyola, he had 50 DraftKings points. Against Duquesne, he had 47. Like, he just has the ability to go nuclear like this because of his ability to fill up the peripheral stats. And we already mentioned St. Louis is a team that will give you a ton of blocks and steals. So that really does make me intrigued to play Enoch Cheeks, and I think $7,500 is a very reasonable salary to do so. Now, Dayton's 5th starter, we mentioned 4 of them already: Malachi Smith, Enoch Cheeks, Nate Santos, and Emil Latang. Their 5th starter is Javon Bennett. He's a transfer from Merrimack. He's solid. Like, he will play a ton of minutes. He will get to shoot probably 5-ish threes. He'll probably hit 2 or 3 of them. He's a good player, but I'm not super intrigued from a DraftKings perspective because he very rarely has ceiling games. Against Duquesne, he did have his highest of the season, 33.25 DraftKings points, 16, 3 and 3 with 2 blocks and 2 steals. That's not common for him. He went 4 for 5 from 3 in that game as well. So I'm just not super interested in him. I don't think he has the same ceiling that a guy like a Cheeks or like a Malachi Smith or like a Emil Latang does in fact have. Now, with Dayton being a team that's looking for answers, they will play some of these bench guys like Juwan Simon, Jacob Connor, Hamad Musa. They've all played minutes in recent games, but like, they haven't been out there long enough on the floor to record any, like, enough significant stats to be worthy of playing in DraftKings. But just don't be shocked when you do see them out there. All right, now on the St. Louis side, this is a team that very much is influenced by their head coach, who came over from Indiana State, Josh Schertz, and he brought his 2 of his best players from Indiana State with him. Their starting 5 is Isaiah Swope at the 1, Kobe Johnson at the 2, Gibson Jemerson at the 3, Kalu Anya at the 4, and Robbie Avila at the 5. And let me tell you, they really don't want to play their bench. Those 5, if they stay out of foul trouble, are going to play like all of the minutes because a lot of their best bench options are hurt, and they don't really want to play a whole lot of guys outside of them. Really, Amari McCautry is like the only guy that plays significant minutes off the bench that I think is at a reasonable price on DraftKings at $3,100. But even then, I'm probably not even like going down that far to play him. So let's just talk about the starting 5. So the 2 players that have the highest usage rate on this team are the 2 transfers from Indiana State, Robbie Avila and Isaiah Swope. Avila got famous last year for his appearance. They called him Larry Nerd, Steph Blurry. There was all kinds of nicknames that he had. It was super entertaining. He's at St. Louis this year, and he's still doing Robbie Avila things. He is a center who is very skilled, elite footwork in the post. They will run their offense through him as a hub 5, and this leads to he can have some big-time DraftKings performances. Now, I will say this. I think he is going to struggle with Dayton's bigs. I think that Dayton is going to play Latang and Isaac Jack a lot. Those are 2 bigs who are very nimble on their feet, and they're both significantly taller and lengthier than Robbie Avila. So I don't think this is going to shape up to be the best matchup for him, but crazier things have happened. Like, he could absolutely go off because the ball's going to be in his hands a ton. Isaiah Swope is their point guard. Bigger guards have given Dayton issues this season. He is not a bigger guard. He's quite diminutive. And in fact, his last 4 DraftKings games have not been pretty good. He hasn't scored over 21 DraftKings points in 4 games, but he is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. And so that does give him quite a bit of upside as well. I think $6,400 is a very reasonable price tag to pay for him. Now, at the 2, they've got Kobe Johnson. He is normally not a supremely extremely high usage player, but he is going to play a ton of minutes. $5,900, and that price tag is very much inflated because he just had 32 DraftKings points in their last game against VCU. I would prefer to not chase that and go with the players who have had more usage over the course of the season than a guy who's at probably a higher price tag than he should be. Gibson Jemerson is the 3. He's been at St. Louis for seemingly forever. He's had over 33 DraftKings points in each of his last 2 games, but he's a guy that I typically don't play guys of his profile. He is pretty much just a shooter. Now, he's quite good at it. He's a very effective shooter from both the mid-range and 3-point, but that's pretty much all he does. He doesn't ever record any assists. He doesn't get you a lot of blocks or steals. He averages 4 rebounds a game. And those last 2 performances, 33 and 37 DraftKings points, they've come off the heels of stealing rebound games, as well as having at least 2 steals in both of those games as well. So I got to be honest, I'm not a fan of this profile. If you're looking for like a game stacking option, I think you can go with him, because if this game sees a ton of points scored, it's likely that he's going to be scoring them. But I'm just not all that intrigued with the profile that he normally plays with. All right, now that does it for game number 2. Let's go ahead and talk about game number 3, Indiana at Purdue. This is an interesting one because you got 2 teams with very clearly exploitable weaknesses with very clearly elite options to exploit those weaknesses. KenPom has this game as 79-67 in favor of Purdue. That is a game total of 146, which is the second highest on the slate. But interestingly enough, Purdue is the highest KenPom team total of the slate, whereas Indiana is the lowest because this game has the biggest spread on the entire slate. Now, in terms of statistics, Indiana plays with a fast tempo, 108th in tempo, 64th in defensive efficiency. Indiana is a very poor 3-point shooting team. They are a very good rebounding team. We'll discuss why. Purdue ranks 289th in tempo and 25th in defensive efficiency. So you're getting not a fast team that plays good defense. Purdue is not a great matchup to target. However, Purdue offensively is an elite shooting team, and they are a very poor interior defense team. They are not a great defensive rebounding team. They are not a great shot blocking team. They're not a good 2-point defense. They just don't really defend the interior all that well. So how can we exploit that if we're Indiana? Well, Indiana is going to play big fellas. All right, starting with the man in the middle, Oumar Ballo. He is a double-double machine. He's at $9,000 on DraftKings, and so that means we want at least 36 DraftKings points from him, right? Well, he's done that in at least his last 4 games. He's a solid option. He can block some shots. He can get some steals. He's very likely to record a double-double. As long as he can stay out of foul trouble, I really like the prospects of Oumar Ballo, giving you about 40 DraftKings points, knowing that Purdue is not a good interior defensive team. Now, Malik Reneau is probably going to be a lot more popular than Oumar Ballo, though. And the reason why is because he is coming back from injury. Against Northwestern, he only played 10 minutes. Against Maryland, he was back in the starting lineup, played 24 minutes, but he got in foul trouble. And he had 4 fouls, and he only put up 19.5 DraftKings points. But he put up 14 shots in those 24 minutes, had over a 30% usage rate in those 24 minutes that he played. To me, that bodes very well for if he can stay out of foul trouble, he's probably going to go back to playing 25-plus minutes like he was before his injury at a high usage rate against a poor interior defensive team in Purdue. I really like the prospects for Malik Reneau, and I think $5,800 is a very reasonable price tag to pay. If he just gets you 24, 25 DraftKings points, you will be a very happy camper. Now, they will also play Mackenzie Mbako, who is like a big small forward or a small power forward. I mean, he plays a lot of the 3 and the 4. He had been really, really bad up until recently. The last 2 games, he's put up 30 and 23 DraftKings points, taken at least 12 shots in both those games. I would prefer to play Reneau and Ballo just from the prospects of how Purdue normally defends. But Mbako, if they do play him at 3, is going to have a massive size advantage over whoever they put on him. And so maybe that's something that could be exploited. It wouldn't shock me if he had a ceiling game, but I'm probably going to have a lot more Ballo and Reneau. Now, for the Miami guards, look, man, they're just a mess. Miles Rice is their starting point guard. He's been kind of a disappointment after transferring over from Washington State. He's at $6,000, so you want 24 DraftKings point from him at least. Well, he hasn't done that in the last 5 games, and Purdue's guards are pretty good defensively. So I'm I'm just not all that intrigued, man. I'm just not. Anthony Leal is the 5th starter. They have recently moved him into the starting lineup. I would describe him as a glue guy. He is a guy who is going to make hustle plays. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to push the tempo on the break and get you a few assists, a few blocks, a few steals. But he's not a scorer. He's taken 4 total shots in his last 2 games. 5 in his last 3 games. He's just not a scorer, and that really limits his upside. In the game against Maryland, it was his second best DraftKings performance of the season. I'm sorry, third best DraftKings performance of the season. And it was 17 DraftKings points. So I'm just not really here for that. Like, you can play him, but I'm not going to. Trey Galloway does come off the bench, plays a lot of minutes off the bench. He randomly has ceiling games just when he's hot shooting. I don't particularly think it's super likely to happen here in this one. And then one of the most confusing guys to me, Kanan Carlisle, he was really good at Stanford last year, transferred over to Indiana, has been a colossal disappointment. Only played 21 total minutes in his last 2 games. Look, the kid's talented, and he might randomly have a big game, but you're really pushing it if you want to play him. $3,300, like, he could have a ceiling game, but man, there's no safety there. He could not play at all. All right, now let's talk about the Purdue side. They're a little easier to predict. So they've switched up their starting 5 a bit. It's the 5 highest priced guys on DraftKings. And really, they're the main guys that play. Braden Smith is one of the elite options on this slate at $10,000. He is a guy who can legitimately go get you a triple-double. He's going to take double-digit shots most likely. He's going to get a few steals most likely. He averages over 2 a game. And he's going up against a team who is notoriously poor at defending guards. This has all the recipes for a Braden Smith smash spot. If you don't want to play Braden Smith, may I suggest Fletcher Lawyer, his wingman in the backcourt, who is coming off of a 25 DraftKings point performance against Michigan, where he put up 18 real points on 6 for 13 shooting. This is another guy who can take advantage of Indiana's poor perimeter defense, especially considering he doesn't really drive to the rack a whole lot. A lot of his shots are threes. So I really think this is another good spot for Fletcher Lawyer. And if you're not playing Braden Smith, I think it makes a lot of sense to play Fletcher Lawyer. If you're not playing Fletcher Lawyer, I think it makes a lot of sense to play CJ Cox, who is the other starter in this backcourt, recently moved into the starting lineup, has randomly had 2 ceiling games since moving into the starting lineup. 41 DraftKings points against Nebraska, 21 DraftKings points against Michigan. The other games have been ho-hum. But he's going up against a team who is notoriously poor at defending guards. So at $4,500, if you're needing some value, why not play a guard going up against a team that's very poor at defending guards? I could make the same argument for Jakari Harris or Miles Colvin, who play off the bench, even though their minutes have been really inconsistent lately. Their DraftKings production has not been super consistent lately. But again, why not play guys at a position against a team that's really poor at defending that position? Now, for the forward spot for Purdue, this is probably where I'm much less interested. They do have Trey Kaufman-Renn at the 4, who is, he does play with a massive usage rate. He does have a great track record of DraftKings scoring, over 33 DraftKings points in 4 of his last 5 games. But I just don't think it's a great matchup going against Indiana's front court. I just don't. Like, even the Maryland bigs on Sunday, that it wasn't really a great spot for him. So I'm probably going to pass on him. I'd much rather pay up for Braden Smith or pay down for Fletcher Lawyer if I'm looking to get somebody on Purdue. Caleb Furst is the other starting big. Their interior defense has been a little bit better since he got in the game, but he's not a scorer either. He's taken 4 total shots in his last 2 games. He only averages 3 boards a game. I'm just failing to see a lot of upside in playing him, if I'm being totally honest. So really my interest on this Purdue team is in Smith and Lawyer and Cox and maybe Harris and Colvin. I don't even know if I'm going to roster either of the Purdue bigs in my 20 lineups. All right, that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Hopefully we gave you guys plenty of information to build your DraftKings lineups or fill out some player props or bets for these 3 games. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress that enough, and I really do appreciate it. We're closing in on 900 subscribers on YouTube now. 1,000 is the big milestone, but we got to get to 900 first. And, the only way I've been able to do that is because of you guys. The likes and the comments and the rates and the reviews help more people find the podcast because the algorithm helps get more subscribers, which is helping me close in on that goal of 1,000, which is pretty monumental in my opinion. So I very much appreciate it. If you haven't done it already, like, rate, and review. I so much appreciate it. But all right, y'all, that's going to do it here for this Friday slate. Like I said, if you want to know my thoughts on the Saturday slate, make sure to follow me on Twitter. Make sure to join the Fantasy Corner Discord because I will be in there. And I will have the Core Plays article on the Patreon up for the Saturday slate as well, even though I'm not having an episode for it. But that's going to do it for this slate, y'all. Hopefully I gave you guys plenty of information that's going to help you guys find the right plays for this Saturday slate. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you guys on this Saturday slate. I will see you guys next time. And for my dad, if you're watching this, go Flyers.